Fasted training for endurance athletes. It's a hot topic. You've got males, females, there's differences. We're going to chat about why we do it and a little bit around diabetics and training in a fasted state. If you're interested in this topic, listen up, follow the channel, and I hope you enjoy the value from some of my insights that I've learned from really good professors and people in this space, and then applying it to my athletes most importantly. Let's start with the female athlete, and I hope there's some females watching this because I know I've had a lot of interaction from males. There's a lot of information around fasted training, and there's plenty of people doing really well on fasted training. That means 12 to 16 hour window of no fuel or no food entering the mouth. Having listened to Dr. Stacy Sims, an exercise physiologist and nutritionist and leading person in this area, I wanted to just dissect a couple of things to pass on to you and highlight. For example, if you are female and training for a long distance and ultra running or Ironman triathlon 70.3, great news is you're already metabolically more flexible than us. That's probably why you do so much better in these crazy ultras that go on for days and days. Due to more oxidative fibers, so basically your muscles are more aerobic, you already have capacity to be super metabolically flexible. That means you can tap into fat and for fuel and glucose or glycogen or carbohydrate storage. Okay, so that's ultimately what we want to be for longer distance events. We want to be as metabolically flexible. That's why we do. Fasted training means no carbohydrates entering the mouth before exercise, okay? Ideally in the morning in a completely fasted 12-hour state. Females have a much higher level of kisspeptin in the body compared to a male. I don't expect you to remember that term. Controlled in the hypothalamus. So you doing fasted training will raise the cortisol and the stress in the body, plus you get the stress from the training, which is a positive stress. Now, studies and research have shown after even 4 days of this downregulates your hormones. You've got one kisspeptin controlling and regulating thyroid and estrogen, and the other one appetite. So males don't have that other kisspeptin neuron, all right? So if you enter in a state of fasted training and then you train high intensity, low intensity for a period of time, hour and a half, you're eventually going to have such downregulation of hormones which will disrupt your circadian rhythms and all the processes from there onwards, and you might be struggling to maintain some lean muscle mass or improve your fitness, your metabolic flexibility, and struggling to potentially lose weight if that's the goal of the session. So one way to overcome this as a female is to have 15 grams of protein with some glucose, some small amount of carbohydrates, 15 to 30 grams pre-workout. So it doesn't have to be a full meal. 15 grams is easily made with either a scoop of protein powder in a double espresso, cooled overnight with some sweetened almond milk. The sweetness obviously gives you some carbohydrates and sugars into the hatch, and 15-20 minutes later you can do a workout. Giving the blood some glucose and some protein in the system so you're not in a fasted state, okay? This is really important so you don't downregulate your hormones. Guidelines vary in terms of how much protein per kilogram of body weight. If we're looking at athletes training some high intensity work, according to Dr. Stacy Sims as well, thank you very much for all the research, 2.2 to 2.4, it's quite high, grams per kilogram of body weight of protein throughout the day. So it used to be a little bit lower, under 2 grams, certainly males around that 2 gram mark, but 2.2 to 2.4 per kilogram of body weight is the recommendation in terms of protein, maintaining lean muscle tissue, and to slow down the downregulation of or prevent downregulation of hormones. Okay, so really think about your daily macro targets. So that's why fasted training for you does not now work. There are going to be times where you are forced into being first thing in the morning and fasted. Just be aware. I think awareness is everything. I urge you to listen to a lot of her podcasts. I'm just doing a short summary here, and now I'm going to move on to the males in a second. You also want to get a vast amount of color from carbohydrates, vegetable and grains in your diet. There's a link, we know, through gut microbiome, and certainly more for females. So variety, colors, and density of nutrients. And live by the 80-20 rule. She highlights this. I definitely advocate that, learning from loads of nutritionists over the years. 80% of the time you're going to eat pretty well, and 20% of the time you're going to have some chocolates and wine. Like, that's his life. We're not trying to be a robot, and it's just not sustainable. So we want sustainable health and we want sustainable energy. So when you hit these targets, if you head into a fasted state for these workouts, you might feel okay, but you're never going to hit those high numbers, which means you don't get the adaptations and you don't get the release of human growth hormone afterwards. Real butter, full fat Greek yogurt, for example, for the dairy myth has been debunked. It's not bad for your health. There's good fats in there alongside avos, oils, virgin olive oil, and seeds. These are the key fats that are great for female regulation. Most of the time, ladies, it's common sense as well, which leads me on to the male athlete. So we know that professional cyclists do a lot of faster training, up to 7-hour rides with only like 1 bar. Bradley Wiggins' famous story around that, going for Mallorca long rides. That's to shift a lot of weight, change the power to weight ratio. They are working at a very high threshold of that borderline 7-8% body fat. You're just running into all sorts of problems for the amateur if you're going down that route. We now know that lighter is not better. Okay, so the general rule of thumb, jot this down, and this is what I've learned from pretty good physiologists, that the first 2 hours is crucial being fasted. That can mean you have a little bit of protein before for satiation. It doesn't spike your insulin or glucose. Protein, pure protein only, if you're hungry. After 2 hours, you can then replenish your glycogen and eat as normal on the bike. Of course, it's slightly differently running. It could be liquid carbs, but you get the picture. So 2 hours seems to be the critical cutoff point, so that works well for half Ironman and Ironman athletes. This is not pertinent to Olympic distance and shorter. The duration of the event is just way too short. However, if you do this too regularly, guys, you do run the risk of heading in towards energy availability problems. Now, it's harder to notice as a male. You might get leaner, you might get necessarily faster as a runner, and the running element of a triathlon. But because we don't have a menstrual cycle, it's very hard to monitor if you're getting enough energy. And red S is a huge issue with males, and it used to be quite associated with female and bone health. So we never want to compromise bone health. Unfortunately, it comes out later with either stress responses or stress fractures of the bones. So don't go down that route. Very much controlled. Why are we doing it? Understand the like what's the outcome of you doing faster training? How long you should do it for and how regularly. Okay, so if you're training 7 days a week and you're regularly doing this, and more than 3 or 4 times, you've got to be very careful, okay, to replenish the fuel. If you're doing it twice a week for the longer rides, to improve your LT1 or your first turning point, your lactate threshold or your ventilatory threshold, improve your fat max, your maximal fat oxidation, yes, then faster training will work. It'll raise your lower end threshold, which is key for long distance endurance. We all agree on that. That's not my view. Your steady state, your zone 2. But I wouldn't do it all year round, and you want to do it in periods where it's quite controlled and regulated, and that's when a coach can help. So please reach out if you need some assistance in this and where you find what is zone 2. I did a video on zone 2 training. And then of course, the best way to find your substrate usage, your fat oxidation, unfortunately is only in a lab with a mask. And they look at your expired gases and see exactly your grams per minute of the fat at a lower wattage or low output or lower pace running. I'm going to show an example of a bike lab report of my own. And here I'm just going to go through where the grams per minute of my fat oxidation was, etc., etc. This report from myself when I was 43, so a few years ago, 2022, it would have been at the start of an Ironman build, so February, winter, lab test with my trusted physiologist. Here's my maximal power I got, so again, not super high, I've had higher numbers, but what I wanted to show you here is the lipid metabolism or the fat metabolism Wasn't a pure fat max test, however, we can get the value 30 to 31 grams per hour, so that works out 0.5 of a gram per minute. So it's not terrible. I've been at 0.3 before. You want to get it higher than probably 0.5 for long distance athletes, even up to a gram per minute, which is then correlated with obviously a work rate of power. Okay, so that's in this area here. So once that's gotten higher, your work rate will be potentially around 160, 180 watts, even up to 200 if you're an experienced athlete, and that's ultimately what you want. You want very good metabolic flexibility, and in order to do that, you need to train in the right correct zones. So for example, VT1 is here and VT2 is further down. You get the graphs here, and this is how they establish it from the ventilatory thresholds. Here's ventilatory threshold 2, otherwise known as LT2 if you're using lactates. And I got up to 94% of my VO2 max. And then it goes through, of course, volume of oxygen. But the most important thing is understanding your maximum lipid metabolism. And if that's the goal of the outcome, is to push that higher, which it should be. And I was not in a very good place there, clearly. And it's great to illustrate that and show what can be done. And I raced in the April, so 2 months later, and I was in better shape. Now, I've coached some diabetics, only a few in the past, type 1 real diabetics, in terms of they have to monitor it and inject insulin. Of course, I'm no medical person, but we didn't do any fasted training. They probably wouldn't have done it. It's risky, it's too dangerous. So for diabetics, I wouldn't even go down this route. You probably know this already. I just had to bring this in because I've actually had some experience, and them males particularly training on the bike indoors and getting very lightheaded and actually getting very hypo. So doing it first thing in the morning, so you have to have something in your bloodstream, and that's tightly regulated by the pancreas, and they'll be on continuing blood glucose monitoring. So don't have to go into that, and I'm not medical. It's just to highlight that area. So you've got male, female, and diabetics, and you can see the differences now. It's not just like one size fits all. Really understand it and what you're trying to get out of the session. I think that's crucial. Context is key. For some people, it's no good, and it's just going to wreck your energy levels through the day, especially if you're doing double session days, so a bike and run or double bikes. If you're trying to shift your huge metabolic gains and it's very controlled and it's a few percentages, you're more on the elite end, then it's super feasible to do that. And I've seen some great gains manipulating diet, higher fat diet, a little bit less carbohydrates, and then doing 6 to 8 weeks of fasted training and then coming back to regular training. So if I've had you this far, thanks for watching. In summary, okay, so understand the benefits. It's very low stress, which means you can do a huge amount of volume of fat max training, but then that comes with a caveat of catching up and making up for calories. You just got to understand that. It'll increase your overall health for sure. It's a great glucose dump. So first thing in the morning, if you had a high sugar meal the night before because you went out and you did that 80-20 in life, it's a great way to dump some glucose. And it increases your HRV, your heart rate variability. Over a period of time, you'll see it trend upwards because it's very low state, low zone 2. It's great for the overall health. So it'll improve your mitochondria as well, and basic across the board, it'll lift your rates, your threshold point, your second threshold, and it will contribute a little bit to your VO2 max, especially if you do a lot of volume. So I hope this was helpful. Drop me a line on the comments below if you want a little bit more information around this, and I'm happy to help as much as I can. Otherwise, if you're looking for some coaching help, my coach Felix has some space available into 2025 now. Be watching this at the beginning when it's been released, and we'd love to try and help you achieve your goals.